So, as I've mentioned before in previous videos, I have been doing in my entomology lab an analysis of Wolbachia bacteria within different insects, but I've never really mentioned what exactly the Wolbachia does to these insects. So, Wolbachia is a type of bacteria. It is actually a type of Rickettsia bacteria. I've mentioned other Rickettsia before. Other types of Rickettsia cause disease include Rocky Mountain spotted fever and typhus, which are some pretty serious diseases that infect humans, but fortunately, Wolbachia does not infect humans, so far only known to affect arthropods, so like insects, spiders, all those, and some nematodes, so roundworms. So, Wolbachia infections are passed down maternally. So that means if a female insect is infected, she will pass down her infection onto her offspring, but if a male insect is infected, it just stops with him. He will not pass it down to his offspring. Now, this has the result of causing a ton of interesting effects within insects. Well, okay, other stuff too, but my lab was about insects, so I'm going to be mainly talking about the insects. So some of the effects exhibited by insects infected with the Wolbachia include feminization. So what would have been both male and female embryos result in the male embryos essentially just being switched over to female. So even if they are like chromosomally male, they're just female. They exhibit female everything, and chromosomes are a bit wonky in insects regardless, but yeah, even if they were going to be male, they are now female. Another effect of this is inducing an increase of parthenogenesis. So I've talked about parthenogenesis before, but essentially what it is a form of asexual reproduction, where the female does not need the input of male gametes. She can just make eggs on her own, but those eggs will be, at least in this case, they will again all be female. I did touch a bit more detail on that in my video about haplodiploidy, but essentially, instead of having fertilized eggs turn out to be male, the unfertilized eggs just turn out to be all female. And again, just resulting in a much higher rate of female offspring. Another interesting effect of Wolbachia is just male lethality, where both male and female embryos are produced, but the male embryos are non-viable, or the eggs are non-viable. So instead of hatching out into male offspring, the embryos or the eggs just don't develop fully and they die instead. Again, resulting in all-female batch of offspring. Kind of the final-ish result of the Wolbachia infection is cytoplasmic incompatibility. So what that means, if an uninfected individual mates with an infected individual, the resulting offspring will either not be viable or they'll just be abnormal and not have very high fitness, so they don't really survive. Same thing goes that if two individuals that are both infected with Wolbachia but are infected with different strains, if they try to mate, it won't result in healthy or viable offspring as well. This causes a strong selection towards either mating with infected individuals with the same strain or doing the asexual parthenogenesis reproduction. Regardless of the cause, all of these factors heavily push towards the production of solely female offspring. Now, this can have many different types of impacts on the insect population. So, one benefit of this is that insect populations of pests and stuff can be intentionally infected with Wolbachia in order to decrease genetic diversity and act as a form of pest control, which could work with crop pests or mosquitoes and all that. However, this does greatly reduce genetic diversity because asexual reproduction in and of itself decreases genetic diversity because you're essentially just making clones. And genetic diversity is very important in the health of a population. So if It's in local species that are already at risk, like native species that are critical to the environment. A rampant Wolbachia presence isn't great because that makes the population as a whole more vulnerable to becoming endangered or even extinct. Oh, there is also another very interesting fact about this. I found a paper when I was researching for my own lab report. Apparently, the presence of Wolbachia in disease-carrying mosquitoes will actually decrease the prevalence of those diseases. So, for example, mosquitoes carrying viruses such as like yellow fever or West Nile fever, disease, West Nile whatever, or dengue fever, they actually, when infected with Wolbachia, they have decreased viral load, so that could be very useful in decreasing those viral diseases, which is a very cool idea. But anyway, Wolbachia is a very interesting bacteria that fortunately, as of right now, is incapable of infecting humans.